Hello, friends, welcome again. Friends, today we want to discuss the poem Dejection and Ode, which is written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Friends, in this video, first I will give you some introductory idea about the poet and the poem. Then we will try to examine this poem as an ode, and then we will discuss the poem stanza wise, and then later we will discuss the important ideas or major themes presented by the poet, and then at last we will examine the autobiographical and romantic elements of this poem. So, friends, let's begin with the introduction. Friends, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, known as St. Coleridge, was born in 1772 and died in 1834. Okay, and this poet, St. Coleridge, is considered as an extraordinary poet of English literature who lived during the period of Romantic Revival. This period of Romantic Revival from 1798 to 1830, friends, is considered as the golden period in the entire history of English literature. S.T. Coleridge is also known as the poet of supernatural elements. That means we find some supernatural elements in most of his poems. Okay, and not only this, S.T. Coleridge, along with William Wordsworth, they are considered as the founders of the new movement which began during this period of Romantic Revival, and that new movement was the movement of Neo-Romanticism. So, S.T. Coleridge is the pioneer, is the founder of this movement of Romanticism in English literature. Coleridge is mainly known for his two poems, Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Kubla Khan. And these two poems are full of supernatural elements. Okay, as far as this poem is concerned, Dejection and Ode, this is a masterpiece and this is a magnum opus, which expresses, the poet's unknown fear of losing his gifts of poetic art and imagination. This poem, Dejection, the title, if you read the title, the word dejection, it means the depressed or sad condition of mind. So, from the title itself, we understand that here the poet has tried to express his sad condition of mind. Okay, now let's examine dejection as an ode. Friends, ode is a type of lyric. Okay, it is a short poem which is generally addressed to somebody. Okay, it is generally meant to be sung and it is very serious and lofty by nature. In odes, the poets generally discuss some serious ideas. Okay, in this ode Dejection and Ode, in this poem, Coleridge has expressed a very serious issue of his loss of poetic capabilities, poetic art, and his loss of this power of imagination. So, this is an ode. Okay, now let's start to understand the poem stanza wise, right? In the first stanza, the poem, this poem is actually written in 8 stanzas of different length. Okay, so you can call this an irregular type of ode. Before the first stanza begins, Coleridge has presented 4 lines from a well-known poet, Sir Patrick Spens. Read these 4 lines. Late, late yestreen I saw the new moon, with the old moon in her arms, and I fear, my master dear, we shall have a deadly storm. You know, if you read the third line, the poet is talking about some fear. So, you can say that this poem in the beginning itself, tries to express the poet's fear of something. Fear of what? A deadly storm. A deadly storm is going to come, going to arrive in his life. So the poet has some unknown fear of a storm in his life, right? In the second stanza, the poet calls or invokes a lady called Sarah. Sarah was a lady whom Coleridge loved in his personal life. Okay, so he addresses this poem to this lady Sarah and suggests that his pain is the result of a broken heart. So the first and second stanza, these two stanzas express the sad condition of the poet's mind. He says that he has been endlessly gazing. Gazing means looking at the skies and the stars. It is a time of night, and the poet looks at the sky, he looks at the stars, and he claims that he is so overwhelmed with sadness. He has become so sad that he can only see and can no longer feel or internalize the beauty of nature. The poet wants to express in this stanza that though he looks at the sky and the stars, but he is not so much impressed by the beauty of this sky, beauty of the stars. Why? Because he is in sad mood. In stanza number 3, he admits that gazing at the beauty of the sky is useless. For why? Because he is passing from the times of pain. He has some pain in his heart, and that's why he cannot enjoy the beauty of the sky. He realizes that outward forms will not relieve him of his inner pain, and that only he has the power to change his emotional state. In stanza number 4, Coleridge again addresses his lady Sarah and tells her that although some things are inevitable in life and controlled by nature, a person must still be an active agent in creating his or her own happiness. He tells his lady that though you are sad sometimes, but it is up to you how to become happy. And so he suggests the idea that man is the architect of his own fortune. It is, friends, it is up to us how to live our life. To make our life happy or to make it sad, it is all in our hands, right? So this is what he tells his lady Sarah. In stanza number 5, the poet describes the characteristics of the feeling of joy to his lady. He tells how important it is in our life to be joyful. Joy or happiness plays an important role in our life. He appreciates the powers of joy which can create beauty as well as create a new earth and new heaven. So the poet understands the importance of joy in life, but somehow the poet is clutched in such a situation where he falls into sadness. In stanza number 6, he remembers his good days of joy. He remembers his past days when he used to be happy, and he thinks of how joy used to overpower his feelings of grief. Sadness and happiness, these are the two sides of the same coin. These go parallel in our life, but joy is something which overpowers our sadness. This is what he says. In stanza number 7, he turns his attention back to the bad weather. He feels that the weather is getting bad, and within this fearful storm, he is able to hear the less frightful sounds of a child looking for her mother. You just imagine that a child looks at some bad weather, and then the child looks at the mother in order to find safety. So the poet himself compares himself with a child, who is afraid of some bad weather, and he looks at the mother. And here the mother is Sarah, okay, or the mother is nature. He wants to find out relief for his sadness, for his pain, right? In stanza number 8, he says that he has presented the idea that he has no intention of going to sleep. However, he wishes for sleep to visit his lady and to use its healing powers to lift the lady's spirits and bring her joy. He, in the last stanza, he wishes to sleep, but unfortunately he cannot. Okay, and he tries to tell the lady that perhaps your spirits and your joy can lift me up from this sadness. Sorry. Coleridge concludes the poem by wishing the lady eternal joy at the end. Now, friends, let's have a look at the most important theme of this poem, and that is the loss of power of imagination of grief. All throughout the poem, we discussed that the poet is in sad mood. Okay, but the question is why? Why the poet is sad? Why the poet is in grief? The poet is sad because he feels that he has lost his power of imagination. And friends, you know that in the life of a poet, the power of imagination is very important. This power of imagination is a tool of the poet which helps him write poetry. Because in writing a romantic poetry, you need the power of imagination, and the poet feels somehow that he has lost his power of imagination, and that's why he is in sad mood. Okay, if I give some reference to Shelley, P.B. Shelley was also a romantic poet of the same period of romantic revival. P.B. Shelley has written this line in one of his poems. This line is, "If winter comes, can spring be far behind? So what if the winter comes?" Because the winter is always followed by the spring. That means the poet is very optimistic. Okay, the poet wants to say, Shelley wants to say that so what, we are passing from some bad days, bad times. Why? Because change is the essence of life. After bad days, you will definitely going to have some good days. So Shelley is very positive. But for Coleridge, Coleridge writes these lines, "If the old moon is in the lap of the new moon, a storm is in the offing." So here Coleridge is very pessimistic, and he says that the storm is going to arrive in my life. Bad days are going to arrive in my life. So pessimism is presented by Coleridge in this poem. In this way, Coleridge has introduced his fear of the storm. He has some unknown fear of some impending danger in his life. Here the poet wants to suggest that he is afraid of the arrival of some storm in his life, and he thinks that his poetic talent or poetic powers will be lost. Okay, this poem is addressed to a lady called Sarah, as I told you in the beginning. Sarah is pure at heart, But the difference between Sarah and the poet is that the poet is very sad and Sarah is full of joy. Therefore, her nature is always festive. Festive means she enjoys her life full of joy. The poet finds a contrast between his mood and the mood of Sarah. Here, in this poem, the poet remembers that in his earlier days he had enjoyed his life like anything. In those days, he even used his misfortunes, his bad times as material to view visions of delight. He used to find out delight even from the sadness. But now the time is different. Now the poet has lost his hope of being joyful, and he is afraid that perhaps my power of imagination will be lost forever. Okay, he says that he was born with superb power of imagination, but it is almost dead now, and that's why he is in sad mood. He tried to be patient, forgetting the loss which he had suffered. So he tried to cultivate the study of metaphysics. He tries to study metaphysics so that he wants to regain his natural powers of imagination by this study. But this was his plan. He did it, he practiced it, but this did not help him much. So he was tangled in metaphysics, and still he is feeling sad and unable to arouse imagination in him. So, all in all, we can say the central idea of this poem is his loss of imagination, loss of his powers of writing poetry. Now, let's examine some autobiographical elements and romantic elements of this poem. Friends, this poem is autobiographical by nature. Why? Because it expresses the poet's personal emotion, his personal mood, his personal grief or sorrow, and his loss of power of imagination and his poetic qualities. So, this poem is subjective by nature. Because this poem is subjective and personal, that's why you can say that this is a romantic poem, right? The love and respect for nature which the poet has presented in this poem also makes this poem a romantic poem, right? Mark these words: "O lady, we receive but what we give. And in our life alone does nature live. Ours is her wedding garment, ours is her shroud." So the poet here presents how nature is important in our life. He says that nature has given everything to us. Our wedding garment means your costumes, and our shroud means the last shroud that we get at the end of death. All these things are given by nature. So the importance of nature in our life is also presented by Coleridge in this poem. That's why you can say that this is a romantic poem. Okay, at the end, I want to quote some lines written by Dawson. Dawson is an important critique of English poetry. He has written about the imaginative power of Coleridge. He says that it is in the world of pure imagination he is most at home, and it is there he retains his highest literary excellence. So Dawson wants to say that the power of imagination makes Coleridge an excellent poet. Okay, this is his highest literary excellence. But the problem is that Coleridge is sad. Why? Because this power which makes him an excellent poet he feels that he is losing this power or he has lost this power. So, in Dejection, he surprises the readers by saying that he has lost his mental vision, but his poem does not help him in this matter. The poem is highly imaginative and it perplexes the reader. It raises some questions in our mind, whether to trust the poet or not. Why? Because on the one hand, the poet says that he has lost his power of imagination, but on the other hand, he has written this poem, or the Dejection and Ode, by using his power of imagination. But all in all, we can say that this poem Dejection and Ode is a fantastic romantic autobiographical poem written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Thank you very much.